Let the gentle breeze tousle your hair. Let it whisper secrets into the trees and watch the boughs sway and the leaves dance. Inhale deeply this cool, pure, crisp air.
Today seems to be a very windy day. Just look at Chotu. His fur too is flying.
Ayo, I have to hold on to my chotis. I hope they don't fly off. Look at all those leaves. The wind is blowing them higher and higher. At this rate, they may reach the moon.
They will never reach the moon, Kunti. The moon has no weather, as it has no air, no atmosphere like we do on Earth. Do you know what would happen if we did not have any atmosphere here? We would burn up with the sun's heat during the day, like the burnt black as charcoal bhakris I sometimes end up making when I try to help your ma. And at night, we would freeze into ice blocks.
So it is the air that gives rise to the wind? How?
Because when one place has a higher atmospheric pressure and another place has lower pressure, the air flows from the place with higher pressure to the place with lower pressure.
Did you understand, Chotu?
And I see dark clouds gathering now. There is a lot of drama going on up there. The wind has brought with it humidity from the higher pressure area.
Yay! It has already begun to rain, even though the monsoon is supposed to be over.
This is freak weather. You are right. According to the climate here, it is not supposed to rain at this time. But sometimes changes in temperature and humidity can cause such day-to-day freak weather.
Chotu, stop shaking so much. You're splashing water all over me. And all this weather can only happen if there is atmosphere. Dadaji?
It only happens in the lowest layer of our atmosphere, the troposphere. I can see your eyes turning as wide as bhakris. Puzzled, are you? Our atmosphere has several layers. Let me explain. Troposphere is the lowermost layer. It is about 18 kilometers thick, around the equator. Towards the poles, it is less thick, only 8 kilometers. The troposphere is the wettest layer, and almost all the weather changes take place in this layer. The clouds, too, are to be seen only in this layer.
Wee! I would like to sit in an aeroplane and fly through the clouds. It would be such fun.
The aeroplane pilots normally avoid flying in the clouds because so many weather changes can take place in the troposphere, like rains and winds. Pilots actually prefer to fly higher than the troposphere in the next layer, which is the stratosphere. This layer extends about 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface.
You mean the weather changes do not take place in the stratosphere?
Bilkul sahi. Here, there is very little water vapor and the air blows only horizontally. It becomes colder very gradually as you go higher in this layer. And at the end of this layer, there is a band of ozone gas which protects us from the harmful effects of the sun's ultraviolet rays.
Arey haan, Master Ji in school was talking about an ozone hole near Antarctica. That hole was caused by a chemical called chlorofluorocarbon, which was once used in sprays. The ultraviolet rays from the sun in those places could cause cancer. But now, chlorofluorocarbon is banned all over the world.
Shabash! My Kunti is clever. So, now the ozone hole is much smaller, right? It had grown very wide in September 2020 due to natural activities by meteors in outer space. But by December 2020, it thankfully closed up once again. Acha hua.
By looking up to the sky, I could never imagine that air had different layers and that so many different things happen up there. Did you, Chotu?
Oh yes, above the stratosphere is another layer, the mesosphere layer. Here it becomes very cold as the height increases and the temperature can reach minus 100 degrees Celsius. It is the coldest layer in the atmosphere. And did you know you can watch shooting stars, which are actually meteors, best in this layer?
How come these meteors never reach us down here?
That is because they get burnt off by the friction with the particles in the lower layers of our atmosphere. Very rarely do they pass through the atmosphere and strike Earth. But about 40,000 years ago, in Buldhana district in Maharashtra, a meteorite did strike. Its impact formed a crater which got filled with water to form a lake.
Really? What is the lake called?
It is called Lonar Lake and the crater is called Lonar Crater. The water in it is salty and recently it turned bright pink in color owing to a bloom of salt-loving microorganisms.
Ayo, that's so interesting. And Dadaji, what is above the mesosphere? Is there yet another layer?
The next layer is the thermosphere. Here, the temperature increases rapidly with height. But the amazing thing is that the air is so thin up there that you cannot feel the heat at all. This layer has charged particles which produce beautiful colors in the sky, which can be seen at the poles. They are the northern lights or aurora borealis and the southern lights or aurora australis.
But how do these charged particles produce such amazing colors?
The winds from the sun too have charged particles. Positively charged particles called protons and negatively charged particles called electrons. When the particles from the sun collide with the charged particles in the thermosphere, a lot of energy is released. This energy we get to see as light of different colors.
Dadaji, you say that our atmosphere is 480 kilometers wide. How come with so much air above us, we don't feel its weight on us?
Smart question. Indeed, air does exert pressure, but our body too has its own pressure, so we don't get crushed under it. Let us carry out a simple experiment to show that air exerts pressure.
Dadaji takes 2 flat steel plates. He pours water on one side of both plates so that they are completely wet, and then presses the 2 plates together.
Now, Kunti, I want you to pull the 2 plates apart.
I just can't pull them apart.
Do you know why? The water on both plates pushed away any air between them. What with air exerting pressure on the outside of both plates and no air in between them to counteract that pressure, it becomes impossible to pull them apart.
So, how do we pull them apart?
The only way to do so is to slide one plate over the other.
This reminds me of the day Ma made hot upma for my tiffin box in school. She closed the box while it was still hot. I just couldn't open it later. Was it because the steam coming from the hot upma had driven out all air from the box?
Bilkul sahi. The outside air exerted pressure, not allowing poor Kunti to open her tiffin box, and she had to go hungry, right?
Really? After listening to your stories about the atmosphere and doing that experiment, I find the atmosphere so fascinating. And what about the story about our air? Is air everywhere?
Yes, there is air in all water bodies, and there is air in the soil too. How else would creatures living inside water and soil breathe?
I know that there is air in the water. Whenever Ma boils water, I can see bubbles of air escaping.
Do you want to see the air in the soil? Let's get an empty vessel from home and a tumbler of water.
Dadaji asks Kunti to put a handful of soil into the empty container. He then pours the water on the soil.
I can see it, Dadaji. I can see the bubbles of air escaping from the soil. Your experiments are such fun.
Chotu, what are you up to? Are you two trying out some experiment?
Chotu is panting with his long pink tongue hanging out and breathing carbon dioxide into the plants. He is actually helping them to carry out photosynthesis. Isn't that so, Dadaji?
Yes, plants do need carbon dioxide to make food like carbohydrates. And while they do so, they give off oxygen, which all living beings need to breathe for energy. There are plants everywhere on our planet, even in the oceans. That is why the air contains as much as 21% of oxygen at sea level.
So, when we climb higher than the sea level, does the air become thinner? Is that why mountaineers have to carry oxygen cylinders?
Bilkul sahi.
And we humans and all other animals do the opposite of plants, right? We take in the oxygen given off by plants and breathe out carbon dioxide.
They convert it into carbohydrates and store the carbon in them. That is why trees and forests are called carbon sinks. But, of course, when we burn wood as fuel or when there are forest fires, huge amounts of that same carbon enter back into the air as carbon dioxide.
It is like a chakra, a cycle between air and plants. So many things in nature are like chakras. The earth spins round and goes around the sun. The moon goes around the earth. And Chotu too loves to spin round and round, chasing his own tail.
Very true. That is how a balance can be maintained in nature. But in recent years, we humans have been carrying out activities which give off a lot more carbon dioxide than the normal amount of 0.04% of air.
Like those factories in the next town our school had taken us to visit. They were burning fuel inside. Any kind of burning gives off carbon dioxide, isn't it?
And what about the time when we had gone to visit Jaya Maushi in the big city Mumbai? There were so many cars there on the road, all burning fuel and giving off carbon dioxide.
Is more carbon dioxide in the air harmful?
Oh yes, carbon dioxide is the chief greenhouse gas which has led to our earth becoming warmer by the day. The others are methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, and ozone. These greenhouse gases form a kind of blanket over our earth and trap the sun's heat, preventing it from being radiated back away from the earth.
We have to find a way to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide. Do you hear, Chotu? And what about the other gases in the air, Dadaji?
Nitrogen is the major component of air, being 78%. Plants and animals all need nitrogen to build up proteins in their body.
So, if we carry out some deep breathing exercises like Yogi Mama, will we get more nitrogen into our body?
I am afraid not, Kunti. We get nitrogen when we eat certain foods like pulses and milk products. When animals die, their dead bodies get decomposed by certain bacteria, and nitrogen is once more released into the atmosphere.
But what about plants? How do they get their nitrogen?
That is another story. Some amount of nitrogen combines with oxygen when there is lightning to form gases like nitrogen dioxide. This dissolves in rainwater and enters the soil to combine with the minerals and forms nitrates.
Nitrogen plus oxygen gives nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide plus rainwater gives nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide plus soil minerals gives nitrites and nitrates.
So, the plants can absorb these nitrates through their roots, but lightning does not take place that often.
Very true. But there is also another way by which nitrogen gets fixed. Certain plants, like pulses, have root nodules on their roots which serve as homes to nitrogen fixing bacteria. The bacteria are happy to live there, and it is they that can turn the nitrogen in the air that is present underground into nitrogen compounds, which are in turn easily absorbed by the plant roots.
This reminds me of an idiom I learnt in school. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Both plants and bacteria benefit by this relationship.
एक हाथ से दो, दूसरे हाथ से लो. I love to hear your comments on my stories, Kunti.
So, 21% oxygen plus 78% nitrogen. That adds up to 99%. What about the remaining 1%?
Coming to that remaining 1% is carbon dioxide and rare gases like argon and helium. And of course, depending on the place and weather, there may be some amount of dust and water vapor too.
Are these rare gases useful to us, Dadaji?
Oh yes, argon is filled in bulbs in place of air. Being an inert or unreactive gas, it will not burn off the filament in the bulb like the oxygen in the air would do.
And what about helium?
My Kunti wants to know everything. Helium is used to fill balloons as it is lighter than air and makes the balloons rise. It is also used to create an inert atmosphere during welding when two metals have to be joined together.
Dadaji, I have noticed that in winter, leaves of plants, especially those that are rough and hairy, have dust on them. In summer, there is less of it, and of course, in the rains, it all gets washed off.
Good observation. This is because hot air rises and carries the dust higher with it. Cold air settles and brings the dust down with it.
That means that not only do plants produce oxygen for all of us and remove excess carbon dioxide from the air, but they also trap dust particles.
Yes, Kunti. Plants are of immense value to us. Did you know that much of the 21% of oxygen in the air is produced in the sea?
How is that, Dadaji?
First of all, our earth is covered with more of oceans than land. 71% of Earth's surface is covered with oceans. The oceans too have plants like algae and phytoplankton.
What are phytoplankton?
Phytoplankton, my dear Kunti, are tiny, microscopic plants in the ocean, just like algae. They serve as food for fish as well as the enormous whales. But most importantly, they help maintain an atmosphere of oxygen around our planet. About 50 to 85% of the oxygen in our atmosphere is produced by phytoplankton and the rest is produced by land plants.
Now that I know how important air is, I am going to make some posters to tell people how we can keep it clean and prevent greenhouse gases.
Take care. Make sure there are no forest fires. Burning trees can release lots of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and lead to global warming. Avoid celebrating by burning crackers. It pollutes our precious air. Plant lots of trees. They help purify the air and give us oxygen.
Clean air, pure clean air. Let clean air be everybody's share. Why use cars to travel not so far? Walking or cycling can avoid air pollution. Greenhouse gases no more on our planet. Cutting down of trees to make buildings of concrete is not a solution to avoid air pollution. Let's all strive to change the tide. Let's all ensure forevermore that air remains clean and pure. Clean air, pure clean air. Let clean air be everybody's share.